Luffy is still running away from the giant boar Saint Walkiri. The former crew of the Roger Pirates are vibing in each of their respective spots of the Grand Line and beyond, and the world is about to become the new Atlantis. It's been a while, by Egghead standards at least, since we last cut away to one of the major players in this game of chess around the world, so it's most likely we won't move away from the island until the arc concludes, even though it seems pretty clear that this conclusion is going to be very different and will stray very far from the formula of arcs prior, just as it has already done. And so, this next bit doesn't really have much direct correlation to everything I just said, but I've mentioned it in videos previously. The dawn of the One Piece world hinges on a triple threat match between Emu, Blackbeard and Luffy. But very quickly, there's also one more guy that maybe a few years ago was still a candidate to be Luffy's final or greatest adversary, depending on how you prefer to look at it, but I don't know if there are many left who still think that way. And I'm talking about Akainu. Sakazuki, the fleet admiral. Once upon a time he seemed like a genuine threat to the Straw Hats and their dreams, but just like Monkey D. Dragon, his reputation has been greatly tarnished thanks to all the time he spent sitting at a desk. And in my opinion, even worse than Dragon, Akainu loves to make these grand declarations of all the things he wants to do just for him to continue brooding. Obviously, I still believe he is a huge factor in the final war, but just no longer one of the biggest. He can pair up against either Dragon or Sabo, so that will still be a clash between some of the strongest at the end, assuming Dragon is one of the top tiers and Sabo continues to grow, which both of them I am sure of. But Akainu just has to rebuild his reputation from here. So back on track, the main discussion surrounding the final war was about who would be Luffy's final opponent, and there's very strong cases for both. On one hand, a guy having been built up for decades and is the man responsible for Ace's death, or on the other hand, someone who is the cause of the current circumstances of the world as well as the main figure behind the Void Century up to present day. Most people side with the former in this case, but I say why not both? For our main competitors, and starting with another one of those factors that have pushed Akainu down the food chain, ignoring the five elders who at the time of his introduction we never really knew anything about. Akainu is no longer the top dog of the world government, because sitting at the pinnacle of the world waiting for the rekindling of an ancient war to make his move is Emu. Next, an orphaned boy who sailed with one of the greatest to ever do it in Whitebeard, Edward Newgate, before betraying the crew and building his own while breaking the rules of the world and possibly carrying the will of a man who wanted to be king of the world. We have Blackbeard, and finally from Windmill Village in the East Blue, carrying the will of Emu's greatest opposition as well as that of the former king of the pirates, Goldie Roger. He cursed himself at a young age, but through grit, determination and just being himself, that curse has become a blessing, and he will be the man to one day liberate the world. May I introduce Monkey D. Luffy. So we have our three combatants, and all that's left is to figure out the circumstances that will occur to get them each into their respective positions, staring each other down, be it at Laugh Tale, in Marijua or anywhere else. Their current whereabouts: Luffy, Egghead trying to escape the five elders and will head to Albaf with the aid of the giant warrior pirates. Blackbeard's last location is Winter Island, and I believe he will head to Wano after. And Emu of course is still in the flower chamber, currently staring at a portrait of Lily. So Emu is already in place. The battleground for this hypothetical will be Marijua, maybe more specifically inside Pangaea Castle, while each of their factions throw hands around them in the surrounding area of the Holy Land. How Blackbeard gets into position, I've got a whole video covering the details about it, but to summarize the relevant parts, from Winter Island, Blackbeard and a few members of his crew will make their way to Wano to retrieve Pluton, courtesy of information provided by Caribou, and afterwards Lafitte will be in place to get them into Marijua. I don't think Blackbeard will be present for whatever confrontations occur on Laugh Tale, because his ambitions bypass finding the One Piece just the same as Rocksteady Zebek. So the way I think it is going to go is that I've laid out how Blackbeard will get to Marijua from his current location on Winter Island, but there is still one major event that has to happen with his character. There may be more than one, but this specific one is one of the most important parts of the endgame, and that is the showdown between Blackbeard and Shanks. And as most people predict, including me, this will end with Shanks' death. But it is also here where the timeline gets a bit fuzzy, because I am in the camp that Luffy will reunite with Shanks before the final war, but also in the camp that Shanks is going to die before the final war. And as important as Albaf is, I don't see the reunion happening there. Even with his ties to the Giants, Shanks will have already left. Therefore, we must bring in one more location, being the fake final island Roadstar or Lodestar Island. I think Shanks may wait for Luffy there, and Blackbeard will be on Luffy's trail following him. This way we can hit all of the major beats, Luffy meeting Shanks again, and with Shanks' declaration to go after the One Piece, we have the Straw Hats and Red-Haired Pirates squaring off with the victor being the one to go to Laugh Tale. And doing it this way won't undermine Luffy's achievements so far, because even though Shanks arrived at Lodestar Island first, he did so without all of the road poneglyphs, while Luffy will arrive with all of them. So Luffy and the Straw Hats win, Luffy gives back the Straw Hat and will be on his way to the final island, leaving Shanks on Roadstar where Blackbeard will land later on, and then the Blackbeard vs Shanks event will occur. Shanks dies, all of the stuff on Laugh Tale happens, which was where I would include Cross Guild. I do see them being on the final island just because buggy and falling upwards, you know how it is. So there the Straw Hats and Cross Guild come to blows, the Straw Hats win obviously, and now Zoro is the new world's strongest swordsman, and soon following, Luffy will become the king of the pirates. So there's not much evidence for all this, but following this roadmap we can achieve all of the major points of stature, of relevance. So Luffy and the others leave, begin their journey to Marijua, and the first stop back is Roadstar, where they will discover the beaten and dying Shanks. As for the rest of the red-haired crew, whether they are dead or badly wounded shouldn't really matter, since in this timeline their part in the story is now over. But we got to see them fight more than once at least, which is another little issue people have been speculating about, whether the first time we see the Red-Haired Pirates in action will also be the last time. But here, we will see their first major fights with the Straw Hats and second against the Blackbeard Pirates. So, a dying Shanks then re-hands Luffy the Straw Hat, and after all of that horrible sadness we head to Marijua, collecting all of our allies in the New World as we go, while the other allies on the other side of the Red Line in Paradise convene on the other side of the wall. With the signal for all of this obviously being the news of Luffy becoming the king of the pirates. So Luffy arrives at Marijua, Emu is in Pangaea Castle waiting, and Blackbeard is nearby, most likely boding his time for the optimal moment. We will have gotten the Void Century flashback on Laugh Tale, since all of the pieces were finally together. Luffy and everyone found and saw the One Piece. We won't see it at this point though, we'll only have seen them laughing like Roger's crew, but they know what they are fighting for. It is said that this final war is going to be bigger than Marineford, and I'm 100% confident that it will be. And Emu will be waiting at the top, similarly to how Luffy had to make his way up to Ace on the execution platform. There's a chance he will have to make his way all the way up to Emu as well, and when he does, all hell will break loose. By this point Luffy will know of Emu's existence thanks to everything on Laugh Tale, but realistically, it still is Luffy. None of the intricacies will matter to him. Emu deprived people of their freedom for nearly a millennium, and that's all that matters, that's all it boils down to. And Emu is going to understand that standing in front of him is the second coming of Joyboy and the third coming of Sun God Nika, meaning that we now have round 1, Luffy the Sun versus Emu the Earth, and that will last until the third party shows itself, and they've probably been watching this whole time waiting for the perfect moment to move, because with the Sun and the Earth comes the infinite dark void of space that can envelop them both. So the only thing that's missing now is finding some link between Emu and Blackbeard, because this is One Piece and we can't have any shallow resolve or reasoning between fighters. There's a story and there's information behind everything. So what is it between Emu and Marshall D. Teach? I've said in a previous video that I believe that the members of the D clan are all descendants of Joyboy's crew, each of whom were bestowed the initial D by Joyboy himself. And Teach has always been different, the story makes that clear on multiple occasions. That will also extend to the D clan as well. He does share their traits, but the big difference being he sits on the evil side whereas everyone else sits on the good side. We of course have Rocksteady Zebek, who we still don't know about yet, but the short God Valley portion of Kuma's backstory honestly make him out to be closer to a Luffy or Oden type of guy, jumping headfirst into things. But as for Teach, I conclude that the rough details of his link to Emu could be through his ancestor of the Void Century, someone who was a crew member of Joyboy's ship but whose idea of freedom was very different to the rest, and Blackbeard is currently carrying that will. And how the fight will end, now this is when the actual One Piece is revealed. Luffy will deliver the final blow in conjunction with cuts back to Laugh Tale, this time showing us the One Piece, and as Luffy smiles and laughs cause the world is free, we will see him smile and laugh at the great treasure. This way the comments made by Oda about One Piece coming to an end once the treasure is revealed will still hold true in this hypothetical future timeline, since all that's left after this is the epilogue, and that is my idea of how we will reach, take part in, and win the final war with every big name heavy hitting character under the sun thrown in for good measure.